Hey everybody, Tim Albrecht here. Welcome to this week's episode of the Ask a YFP CFP segment of the Your Financial Pharmacist Podcast, where we feature questions from you, the YFP community, to be answered by one of YFP Planning's fee-only certified financial planners. Before we jump into today's question, I'm going to give a shout out to YFP Planning's incredible team that makes this segment possible. YFP Planning offers fee-only comprehensive financial planning services that are customized to the pharmacy professional. You can learn more about those one-on-one services and book a free discovery call by visiting yfpplanning.com. Again, that's yfpplanning.com. Okay, this week's question actually comes from a lunch and learn that I did with a group of faculty members recently at a college of pharmacy. And the question was, how much should I have in my accounts, my savings accounts, before I consider retiring? Tim Baker, big question, but really important for many people. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I think, Tim, I don't really even know where to begin to answer this question because there's just so much nuance here. So I'm gonna do the best I can, and then this might be something that we just have for a broader episode. But I think again, the questions that I would have if someone were to ask me this question is well, when are you actually retiring? Which for a lot of people is going to be such a moving target. Are you planning to work in retirement? A lot of people, are doing that more and more in terms of a part-time role to kind of ease into retirement. What does cash flow look like? What's income and expenses? Do you anticipate expenses to ramp up because, if you're not having to go in an office or a hospital every day, are you going to be doing more travel, dining out? Or is there a potential to relocate and change the living situation, which is typically the highest expense as you age in retirement? What's the Social Security claiming strategy? So this is probably one of the biggest questions that has to be asked and answered that is often bungled because we're doing what our brother-in-law or, people at work do. How is your spouse integrated if there's a spouse? And making sure that those plans are in line both with an income, Social Security, all that kind of stuff. And then really understanding, and this might be the genesis of the question is, are you as a retiree, are you overfunded, meaning that you basically have what you need to live the life that you want to live and the goal, kind of work towards the goals that you want to work towards? Are you constrained or are you underfunded? Meaning that, we're what really trying to do is keep the lights on. So I think those would be the questions that I would have to, among others, that I would have to ask to even, understand what would need to be in the savings account or more broadly, even in the investment account. So the question could be asking how much do I need to have savings? And when we're using that synonymously with investments before I can retire. And even that is we have clients because they're more spendthrifty that need a lot more money than someone that is kind of, more comfortable living on a shoestring budget. So I think one of the important things to really understand, and is if this person is asking this question, they're probably in the eye of the storm. And what I mean by that is, anywhere from 5 to 10 years before your retirement age and 5 to 10 years after your retirement age, you really have you're most susceptible to sequence of return risk. So sequence of return risk is the risk that when you start to withdraw on your portfolio, say your 401k or your IRA, the market dips like we're seeing now, and then you're also taking out 40, 50, 60,000. So when that happens, the probability of failure, meaning, money runs out before you pass away, is much, much higher. So the magnitude of the shock to the portfolio is greater the closer you are to retirement age. So if I'm 60 and I want to retire at 65, I'm in that eye of the storm, the sequence of return risk. So that's when I probably at any point in my life want to be the most conservative with my portfolio. So that's one thing to look at. I think the other thing, Tim, when we say okay, what should I have in my savings account? I think it probably might be a good idea to kind of take a look at the major approaches in which one looks at how do we take these assets that we've built over time and kind of make them into a retirement paycheck.
Yep.
So there's really three main ones. One is called the structured systematic withdrawal approach. And this is probably the most popular with advisors. But the idea is that the basis for this is kind of based on the 4% rule. So I'm sure a lot of people have heard this. So the idea is like if I have $1 million portfolio, I can have a sustained withdrawal rate of 4%, which would be $40,000 a year. And that'll basically take me over the course of a 30-year retirement horizon. Now, the systemic approach is much, much more involved in that. And it kind of involves what does inflation do? What does the actual portfolio do year over year? And it kind of modifies, okay, maybe it's 40,000. The next year it's 42,000 because there's improvement. Maybe the next year it goes down to 38. So there's a little bit of like drawing from those accounts along with the Social Security paycheck to kind of make that paycheck for the systematic approach. The other approach, which I think a lot of people understand more, is called the bucket approach. So this is an age banded or time-based segmentation. So the idea is that you have these separate buckets. So bucket one would be things that I need for like 0 to 5 years in retirement, then 5 to 10 years, then 15 years plus. And each bucket is invested a different way. So 0 to 5 years might be like cash, a bond ladder, things like that. 5 to 10 years might be something that's like moderately invested. And then 15 plus years is that's you're more aggressive. And then you kind of replenish the buckets using a variety of rules. So in this case, it might be that if you're looking to retire and you need $40,000 along with what you have from your pension or your Social Security, that is what's basically going to be in your cash account. And that could be where you are dropping that for the year, dropping that for the month, or you actually create a paycheck as if you're getting paid every 2 years. And so that from an understanding, people get that. And then the last one is like the flooring approach, which is basically I take all of my expenses that I have to live. So my essential expenses like my mortgage, my food, my utilities, and then my discretionary, which are like my goals, and I tie it to a source of income. So like we know Social Security is a very bedrock benefit that's not going to go away, even though people think it will. So that would fund the essential expenses, but then the portfolio might fund the discretionary, the goals. That typically is more safety and less like where you're dreaming of like what your retirement could be. But it's a floor. You're creating a floor. And a lot of that is sometimes turn in some of that portfolio into like an annuity. So almost like another Social Security check. So I take $500,000 and I turn that into a check that's going to last the rest of my life. So you're really kind of hedging against mortality risk. So it's a big question, Tim. And I think like to me, the baseline is, are we talking about how much money do I need to retire, which is maybe $1 million, $3 million? Or is it like, what do I need in terms of short term? Like just like you are, when you accumulate, you need an emergency fund because we want to make sure that we have money for that. So there's just so much to unpack with this question that it would take, I think, probably a case study that we need to do in the near future to kind of outline, okay, what are we actually asking here? What are the goals? What are the sources in terms of assets, Social Security, et cetera, that we can start to kind of assemble the picture of answering that question. Do I have enough? And will it last me for my lifetime? Which again is also a moving target because we don't know when we're potentially going to, pass away. So it's a lot of stuff, Tim.
No, it's great though, because I think that, it's a big question, as you mentioned, but it allows us to begin to unpack, some of the decumulation strategies, right? Is what you're talking about there.
Yeah.
We've talked so much about, am I saving enough? What percentage of my income do I need to be put away? And obviously there's variability, volatility along the way. We talk about this date we get to that we have this nest egg in this dollar amount. Okay, well, what's the strategy? How do we build a retirement paycheck? What are the considerations? What are the goals? What are we trying to achieve? And so we're going to be talking about this topic a lot more on the show in the future, probably on the blog as well. We're going to be talking about things like Social Security withdrawal strategies, which we've done a little bit on. We're going to be talking about tax strategies, decumulation strategies, building that retirement paycheck. And then also, how do I know when I have enough, and what is that number, and what are the factors that go into it, and why is planning so important to help people not only in the accumulation phase, but also in the decumulation phase as well. I would point folks to, we have a blog on the YFP blog written by Dr. Jeff Keimer, who wrote our FIRE book, Financial Independence, Retire Early, specifically as a guide for pharmacists. He wrote a blog post, How Much You Need to Hang Up Your White Coat, all about the 4% rule. So for folks that want to learn more about the 4% rule, Tim, you mentioned that here in responding to that question. He does a great job of explaining that concept in that blog post, and we'll link to that in the show notes. So great question, I think, to help us engage in some of these other conversations as well. And so if you have a question as a listener, we'd love to hear from you. You can send us an email, info@yourfinancialpharmacist.com. You can also record your question by visiting yourfinancialpharmacist.com/ask-YFP. As we wrap up this week's episode, an important reminder that the content in this show is provided for informational purposes only, is not intended to provide, and should not be relied on for investment or any other advice. You can learn more about this by visiting yourfinancialpharmacist.com/disclaimer. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great rest of your week.